Okay. um, thank you all for coming and hearing some more stories about the people of the Methow Valley. Um, this I'm gonna tell you who I am reading stories about today, and the ones that I did last week that are also recorded, so you'll know. Today I'm going to be reading about Helen Smith, Frank Carroll, and then a short piece on Frank Thurlow, Stan and Edna Darwood, Virgil Webb, and Bucky Buckmaster. And then last week, um, I read about Joe Yoakum, Claude Miller, Deke Smith, Prudy Imes, and Millie Bagwell, and 4 short excerpts from Carolyn Hotchkiss, Perry Clark, Jean Carroll Hansen, and Charlie Schmidt Sr. Okie dokie, I am going to begin with Helen and Gus Smith, sheep ranchers. And I wrote it for the Methow Valley News in 1977, June 30th, 1977.
Here you go, Mom.
Okay,
Uh-oh.
you ready? Okay, mute thyselves. With 1,000 head of sheep, they set out from Chelan up into the hills toward the Twist River Valley. Helen rode ahead of the flock with a pack of horses, while her husband, Sidney Brumbow, and a friend, Glenn Button, and their sheepdogs followed the sheep on foot. The men walked and seldom rode because sheep have a tendency to wander far into the deep brush, which horses find difficult to maneuver. For 2 weeks, they slowly grazed the sheep with their newborn lambs along through the hills, past Billy Goat Mountain and Cooper Mountain, past Black Canyon, up past Black Pine Lake, and down Buttermilk Creek until they reached the Twist River. The route was the Buttermilk Sheep Driveway, and it was early summer 1930. Along the way, they protected the animals from coyotes and bear that would occasionally stalk the young lambs. At night, after a supper cooked on their portable wood stove, and after they'd gone to sleep in their sleeping bags, the night dog, Rinny, would go to work. All night long, this self-appointed watchdog would keep the sheep herded together and keep the wild animals at bay with his barking. And when dawn came and the sheep herders rose to begin their day, Rinny would curl up and go to sleep, but he was ready to move on when they were. Up in those hills, says Helen, that was all work. But sometimes I'd go ahead of the rest with the saddle horse and do some fishing for trout. Their meals were made up of the fish that she caught, and of course, lamb with little variety. Sidney died in 1943, so Helen was left with the ranch to run and a son to raise. In 1949, George Gus Smith moved to the Twist Valley and bought a place next to Helen's ranch. They married in the fall. Together, they raised hay and ranged their cattle. I guess she had let go of her sheep by that time. They ranged their cattle up Midnight Mountain with the Lamans and the Lamotts and the Pruitts on the Little Bridge Creek allotment. They would ride for 2 or 3 days a week up into those hills to keep track of their cattle. During the flood of 1948, it was an arduous task getting the cream to the creamery. A cable and swing had been strung across the Methow River at the sawmill. After placing the cream on the cart, Gus would have to take a run at it, jump on, and the momentum would bring him about halfway across the river. The rest of the way, he had to pull himself across hand over hand. Then a pickup truck would bring the cream to town. In 1949, Gus helped build the Grange Hall in Twist, as did many other people who donated their time and labor for the project. And when it was finished, there were these barrel stoves in the basement. And during the winter, they would get them cherry red hot. And Bill Robler would begin calling square dances far into the night. In 1950, Gus was called to serve in the Korean War. The call came at a very awkward time. They were in the process of cutting hay, butchering hogs and chickens and the cattle were still up on the range. After reporting, Gus was allowed to come home so he could finish the haying. The two of them rode day and night rounding up their cattle. Then they had to sell everything except their horses and a few household goods, and then they were off to the city. They moved into an apartment house in Bremerton. Helen had brought along several things, read carcasses, to occupy herself, at least for the first few days. She had half a beef, a couple of hogs, several chickens, and an entire deer shot by her son the day before they left the valley, which all needed to be cut up and wrapped. Strangers living in the apartment next door to theirs came over and asked for steaks. For 2 years, they moved 12 times from city to city. Helen, who had never lived away from a farm, was not thrilled. I don't think too much of the cities, she understates. Basically, she felt there was nothing much to do in a city. I have never taken it easy, she said. I don't know what that means. Then she said, except in the cities. That was the most monotonous thing. When the war was over in 1952, they returned to the Methow Valley. It took them several years to earn enough money to buy some livestock. They picked apples, they worked in spuds, they sorted spuds in the winter, they cut spuds for planting in the spring, and they dug spuds in the fall. Gus worked in the sawmill, and they raised hay to sell. By 1964, they moved to their present place and began building up their herds of sheep and cattle. They built miles of sheep-proof picket fence, unique in the valley, which took them about 3 years to complete. They learned to weave the wire around the pickets, scraps from the mill, because the sheep would work the stapled pickets loose, and they spent a good part of their lives fixing fence. Those sheep work a person, says Gus. During lambing time, the ewes must be watched 24 hours a day. Gus is often up till dawn after having worked an 8-hour shift at the sawmill. In the wintertime, the sheep are entertained throughout the night with the loud playing radio. They're up on the news and know which songs are on the top 40. At night, as night descends on the farmhouse, Gus is thoughtful. You know, I think farming is on its way out here. Farming is a remote interest anymore. We're being crowded out of the forest with recreation interests coming in. But for the moment, the work of tending their flock goes on. Helen says, if you didn't work, you wouldn't be satisfied with yourself. This is their belief, and this is why their lives are rich.
Good.
And now this is a story about Frank Carroll. And the headline was, he sailed the 7 seas. It ran in the Methow Valley News, August 25th, 1977. From the ice-clogged waters of the Arctic to Pitcairn Island in the South Pacific, from Shanghai to Tripoli, Frank Carroll has wandered the 7 seas. As a coal shoveling fireman on a coal burning bucket to Alaska, and as first engineer on modern high pressure freighters, that is 750 pounds of steam pressure per square inch. Frank spent 26 years of his life sailing the oceans of the globe as a merchant seaman. Retired from that life in 1970, Frank now lives outside of Winthrop. His mailbox carries the brand FWE, finished with engines. Frank Carroll was born in 1906 in Deming, Washington, and moved to the Methow Valley with his family in 1911. Bill and Minnie Carroll homesteaded on 160 acres north of Winthrop near Cub Creek and the Rendezvous. The first spring had its unpleasant aspects. The wind blew a gale. I can still remember my mother being so mad. That wind was blowing the greens right out of the pan as she was picking them. Then here comes half the roof of the house. We raised most of our own food, our pork and vegetables and all. One time she took down some canned beets that she had put up the summer before, and when she opened them, they didn't smell right. She told me to go and feed the beets to the chickens. Well, we had about 30 pullets that we'd fed all winter, and they were just starting to lay eggs for us. The next morning, after I'd thrown the beets to them, I went to the barnyard and half of them were dead. I watched the others sitting on the roost begin to wobble. Then they just fall over backwards and die. At the age of 11, Frank used to carry a gun to school, supposedly to warn off any rabid coyotes that might be around. This was no empty worry, because in the winter of 1917-1918, Emil Vensky, an early homesteader of the valley, awoke one night to hear a terrible racket going on outside. He arose to see his dog and a coyote in vicious combat. Vensky killed the coyote and discovered it was rabid. Frank enjoyed packing his gun to the Cub Creek schoolhouse, as did several of the other boys. One noon, they began target practice out in the schoolyard, but the teacher put a kibosh to that right away. Now, this article goes on to recount several episodes in Frank's life, and the following is just one. He'd been working as a salmon trap watcher in Union Bay in Alaska. He was sitting on the shore one day with his partner when about 50 pounds of ugly looking glob floated to their feet. Ambergris, Frank hopes. Now, ambergris is regurgitation from a sperm whale, which is used as a perfume base and was at that time worth about $1,000 a pound. $50,000 just wafts up to these two men as they sit on a beach in southern Alaska. But of course, there was some doubt as to whether or not it really was ambergris. So they sent a bid over to Ketchikan to have it analyzed, and the bad news comes back. It's merely whale liver. Dreams dashed, Frank proceeded to extract the oil from the blob, and eventually, on his return to the lower 48,
Did it go away for you too, Dave? Yeah.
Yeah, it did for me, Patty.
Dang. Well,
I think it was, I think it's Diana having problems because everybody else looks to be connected, but she froze up and then dropped off.
well, shoot. Aren't these fun, these Zoom meetings?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm back. What happened?
We lost Diana.
She
We
just
just
Oh,
Yeah,
no, she should be able to get back on.
she froze up and then disappeared.
Okay, can you guys just have a nice little chat and I'll see. Sorry about this. It's terrible. Just entertain each other somehow and I'm going to call her, okay?
Okay.
Yeah, I wanted to find out more about ambergris.
Yeah, no kidding. Or even whale liver.
I had known about ambergris, but I didn't realize it was worth that kind of money.
Well, I didn't know it floated up and in a ball like that.
I wonder if they still use it. I know they were using it not that many years ago, but I don't know that they still are.
I thought you had to kill the whale for it.
No, it's regurgitation.
Wow.
Hard to believe that would be a base for perfume, right?
Or who thought of it? I mean, ick. Oh, you smell so good, just like whale vomit.
Makes me snuggle up next to you, Patty.
Yeah. Mm. Oh dear. Well, this is certainly an interesting way to bump into people, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. There was quite a few more on last week's story readings. We probably had 20 on.
Oh my gosh. I wonder if that many tried today, but because of whatever happened. I mean, I had to use all the numbers. I had to punch the numbers in.
So did I.
But fortunately, I had two devices going at once. So
Okay, Diana said that sometimes in Twisp, she just gets kicked off, but she's trying to get back on. I was talking to all the people on, just letting them know what's happening. Oh, you're all so patient.
We're old. What else are we going to do?
That's, we all lead such exciting lives nowadays.
I had you guys all on mute, so I couldn't hear you. Maybe you could hear me. But I'm still waiting for Diana. Darn. Well, there was one, I left a message on one person's phone, no, two people's phones. And then the other person said that they had another commitment, so.
I did get a hold of Sheila and she had visitors, but she was going to try to come on.
Yeah, I got a hold of her too. So Diane must be trying. I wonder if she went in front of the Meadow Arts, but that would take too much time to walk all the way over there. Darn it. Shoot. She must still be trying to get in because she's not back at the phone. Aw. Well, I might as well tell everybody that's here that we're going to switch this to Thursdays because Sundays, it's not a good day for me. And we just couldn't figure out how Diana could host the Zooms. It just was too challenging. So we're going to do it on Thursdays at what time? I think it was at 11. So we thought Sundays would be great, but it doesn't appear that she can get connected to Zoom, and I don't always want to commit my Sundays. Not that I don't like the stories. It's just I usually have family commitments or whatever. I guess she must still be having problems. That's good. Everybody go get a drink, go to the bathroom. Everybody deserted us. Sonia, is that you? I can't see you, but I see Steve Fradkin. Can you hear me?
I saw her on there earlier. I don't know that she's.
I don't know. Steve Fradkin, I think, is Jackie's brother. Well, shoot. I wish she'd at least come to the phone. Hello? Let's see what else is happening. So that one of the events that we're having, Susan Edsall, that I read that book, and it's a really, really good book, and she is going to talk about her book. So that's coming up. And then Bill Hottell, of course, is going to do his history class. Hey, Sonia, is that you? Hi. I haven't seen you in ages.
Well, I moved back to the west side for about 5.5 years.
Right, I knew that.
And I'm
But
back.
then you moved back here.
Yep, Uri picked me up in March. because of the pandemic.
Yeah, you've been here the whole pandemic.
I've been here the whole pandemic.
I know, that's why I haven't seen you, because it's a pandemic.
I had a stroke in July.
Oh,
I'm just recovering from that.
uh-huh.
Pretty
Okay,
well.
hold on just a second. Hello, Diana?
Hi, Marilyn.
We have to abandon ship. Hold on.
Well, I think we may have to, just because, I just think once in a while, the internet here in town goes sort of fluey, or at
Yeah.
least on this particular
Right.
tab. And
Okay.
it's, I mean,
Well, I bet I'm still recording. I'm